So sometimes it's hard to know where to start when you're trying to make a point or telling a story because there are points within points and things like that, and there's various directions you could go in with it to make the same point, and they all kind of tie together, and you could rant for an hour about each one of them. So I'll just try to start because I think we'll get to the point somehow. But namely that these high pressure control groups that think they're doing something really radical are doing something that's pretty ancient. And it's not actually outside of the box, it is the box. So basically, every single thing you see these people doing, it comes from the government. And they'll pass themselves off as like these, radical fringe do it yourself types, and they're anything but. And one of the things that inspired this train of thought to go further than I already had this train of thought, but seeing it illustrated so brilliantly, and by brilliant I mean like a spectacular disaster in the form of the return of you know who, and all of the things that this person has been saying online, you can find that same line of thinking in Scientology. You can find that line of thinking with the Manson group. You can find that line of thinking right now with various political parties, churches, you name it. It's really not that unique at all. And also, a book I recommend people reading is called Chaos. It's about really how the origins of both the Manson family and Scientology are, really embedded into government mind control and CIA programs, and the use of drugs and the use of mind manipulation on people, and changing their way of thinking, controlling their verbiage, all of this kind of stuff. It's kind of like you're a grand experiment. So if you want to be somebody else's grand experiment, be my guest. But most of us don't. And some of us recognize when we're being encouraged to do something that's self destructive. So if you don't recognize that yet, maybe you should. And also, what I just said, there's documented evidence of this. Look into the Process Church and the British origins of Scientology, and then how Manson, who was basically institutionalized his whole life, had used those documents to work on perfecting his techniques that he later used. And it's all very strange, and you can come to your own conclusions. So, with that being said, I'd like to touch on some of these ideas that are not unique to these people. They're not specially enlightened and out of slavery, like the rest of us are just a bunch of slaves because we think all this stuff is really sick. We must have learned that from someone we didn't just instinctively know that it was. And they're the ones that are learning a way of thinking that's completely unnatural and abnormal. No, 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 they're enlightened. Well, not really. So let's look at some of those. One is about forgiveness. And I believe in forgiveness for things where the person is capable of change and you see that they have changed and they are no longer harming other people and they're trying to make right any harm that they ever actually did. A good example of that would be Mike Rinder. It's one of the reasons I brought up Scientology. He was a Scientologist for most of his life. He did terrible things to other people. He slandered people horribly. He intimidated people. They physically harmed other people. Not quite as bad as an acid attack and a permanent maiming of other human beings, but they did bad things. And he is really sorry for those things in that he now has faced really going against the people that he did that with, knowing it's wrong, speaking out against them, trying to rectify what he did to others. He breaks down emotionally when he thinks about what he did to other people because his conscience exists. This is a very different situation. And most of the people he's spoken with that he personally did terrible things to, they treat him like an ally because they know that that's what he is. But when someone is not your ally, there's no transforming experience they've had, and the kinds of things that they are doing to people are so dangerous that it would end your life, that's a very different situation. And like I said in that other video about this, it's not a matter of vindictiveness, wanting to get people just because. It's a matter of you don't allow people to get away with doing things like this who are continuing to do things like this. There's no transformation that's happened, and the people are still dangerous, so you don't allow them to be. Like that comment that she made in her video where she said she can do whatever the F she wants. You actually can't. You can't do whatever the F you want because some things, when you do them, you're not going to be allowed by other people to do them because we have rights too. That's what you don't seem to understand because freedom, where yours ends, mine begins, Luna's begins, other people's begins. So that's how that works. Another thing to notice with them is loaded language. And that's kind of a catch-all term that really, when you get involved with anything, and it could be a religion, a political party, some weird offshoot diet cult group, whatever the hell it is, they kind of have a certain way of speaking that only they understand because they're so enlightened, of course. But what that really is that they're loading their language down and they want you to adopt their language, not have one of your own. You don't come up with things that you want to say that just came from your own creative mind. They're going to change how you speak, and that kind of shows your alignment with them in your thinking. So, like for instance, the word slave, they've given it a new catch-all meaning, and they use it inappropriately all the time. Um, this is not unlike other cults, and what's so funny to me is that the Spheria Goatis Gaddis cult, and by the way, I noticed his fangirls want to call him Spheria again all the time. That's not his name. The channel doesn't even exist, but whatever. Believe he's a Swedish god all you want. I guess your eyes and your brain don't work. But anyway, the vegan cult, and there's a particular group I'm thinking of that I won't bother mentioning because, they haven't done anything to me, but I've observed them and some of the people affiliated with them and their tactics and their lingo. And they have a whole way of thinking. It's very sick. It's exactly like Spheria. They believe that there's no such thing as free will. So that means we're all bad. We're all capable of being bad. Until you become a member of their cult and adopt their way of thinking, you're probably a bad person. And they kind of put everything on an even plane. So killing a chicken would be no different than killing a human being in their brain. And this is a very sick way of thinking. There's a purpose to it in changing you. And it's just something that's kind of unreal since, Sferio used to make videos talking about the vegan cult, and that was pretty accurate. And then yet he's doing literally exactly the same thing. Another thing, that particular vegan group, and by the way, anytime you see like a high profile, staged, horrible, chaotic like scene from one of these people where they're ripping their clothes off or they're running through a restaurant screaming, that's this particular group that I'm referring to. And they have a history of sexual abuse. They have allegations of such, I should say. They have a history of other types of financial abuses as well, even human trafficking allegations. So, these groups all kind of do the same kind of stuff, don't they? It's somebody at the top, and they really like to keep what they're doing clouded, so you don't really ever know anything. And then the little minions kind of have their lingo, their behavior, and whatnot. And they even have a situation where they all like live in these flop houses together, and it's all over like multiple countries, by the way. So it's really scary. And people believe they're doing something very opposite from how they're doing what they're doing. And then when they're knee deep in it, and they think, this isn't what it said it was, then they're scared and they're worried about leaving because they know how vindictive the group is, and they don't want to deal with that. So they usually go off quietly. A few people that stand up to them face some major problems when they do that, but some have bravely done that, and it's no different. One of the things that they teach people besides the free will thing is, and I have a friend who's involved in that group and who came onto one of my other social media pages, because one thing I'm in agreement with vegans about would be slaughterhouses and animals living horribly before they die. And I made some vegans mad by stating that, look, we're all on the same page as animals have a right to live free before they die. And you should kind of join forces with people who are not vegan and vegan to do something about that. That would actually affect change for animals, which, if that's what you're interested in, you could get a whole lot of people on the same page with that. But they want the all or nothing, these particular groups. And so that's why that has ended up being that way. But this friend of mine saw me make a joke, and I said something about myself. I'd done something goofy that day, and I said, I'm such a spork. When you mix a spaz with a dork, you get a spork. And it wasn't very funny, but it was just a joke. And he comes on, he says, "Oh, I know you're very kind and you're a good person, so we cannot use words like that. It's, what did he call it? Ableist. That's what it was. I'm being ableist." And at first, it really hurt my feelings because I thought, well, maybe it is, a dig at people that are having special needs issues or whatever. I didn't mean for it to be. And then he started doing this all the time about all kinds of things that I would say, and I started recognizing what this is, and I said, "Now look." Because, like I said, that was an insane guitar riff or something, and he said that's ableist because there are people that are mentally ill. And I'm like, okay, yeah, there are. But you know what? There are things in this world that are not sane, so the word insane applies to that. And even if you use it around in a different way, around that kind of a vernacular where you're talking about, music or something sounding outside of the norm or sounding insane, that's okay too. I'm not deliberately harming anyone, and I don't really need a language police telling me what I can and can't say. And they don't like that. They don't like when you do that. We're still friends, but you can tell they kind of back off of trying to control you when they know it's not going to work. But yeah, people can come at you looking really benign and nice, and they can be doing something that really isn't so nice if you get to the bottom of it. And even they don't know what they're being used for, because I consider the person I'm referring to be being used by that group. In fact, that person almost lost their eyesight a couple of summers ago, or no, actually, it was one summer ago, due to their vegan diet, in my opinion. But they won't listen to anyone, and that's their prerogative. They're grown; they can do what they want. But yeah, groups that don't care about your well-being, be it that they don't want you to eat properly, they don't want you to use your own brain, all of that is a problem. And people that actually are slaves are people that don't even look at what they're doing for what it is, and don't think that anybody else should either. Which brings up the next point of putting in place these thought-stopping techniques, which basically would be, it's like if you go to a church and they tell you not to listen to certain rhetoric that has to do with like the historicity of the Bible, for example. Like, don't go read that book. You don't need to wonder about where Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John actually came from, and if they wrote originally about Jesus in allegory format. Don't go looking into that. That'll mess you up. If you do that, you're this, that, and the other thing. So you already have it in your mind that if anybody brings up those books, they're bad. And the same thing goes for this kind of thing. If you bring up certain types of things, you're not thinking for yourself, when in reality you are. You've gotten outside of their little thing and you went and thought for yourself. And so she's doing that constantly. And it looks absolutely ridiculous, especially when it's met with such mind fuck and back and forth. I'm so sorry for doing this judgmental thing, and then turns around and does it again, and all that other craziness. So this is somebody doing a very bad job of it. It's almost like this person is becoming super discombobulated and doesn't even know how to mind fuck anymore. But that's all it is. It's just all, and this idea, they want to pass off this idea too that they're having a good time messing with other people and gaslighting them and doing all this. But in reality, this is a very miserable person. Nobody that wasn't miserable would be doing something like this. Especially when, if anything, like, I think the only member of this little cult tribe that actually would have the potential for a decent life would be, or that wants one maybe, would be Jazz, because she is trying to absolve herself of guilt, and she's going off and doing things that try to, she tries to make herself look a little bit better. She at least has sense enough to know how to do that, and this other person doesn't. In fact, she's just self-destructing. It's almost like it's a suicidal looking behavior to me, mixed with being very all over the place, crazy and harmful towards others, which I think I underestimated her level of being a dangerous person before, because, you know, back before when I was reading that document, I was just thinking, okay, this person, was harmed very badly. And this person, I was just looking for a crime that would be fitting a statute of limitations where you could go after it where he was concerned. And in reading what all he did to her, I thought it was horrible. And I thought, gosh, I guess she's probably, thinks of this like a nightmare now. Hopefully she's recovering from it and doing okay. And then she's here wanting to be a part of it in the sickest way you can imagine. So, wrapping your mind around that, the only way you can wrap your mind around it is to understand that it's insanity, and that a person like this is really possibly dangerous to other people, much more so than I would have imagined. And also, what's funny about that is that they want one set of rules for themselves and another for everybody else. And it's typical, like a bully that, cries out if you ever do anything back. I remember a bully one time when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and she used to literally like take me by the arm and swing me around. If I came around the corner, she'd grab me and do that. And she did that to several other smaller kids. And one day I decided I was just going to pinch her. And I did. And boy, did she ever caterwaul, scream, and cry as though she'd been being murdered. So that's what they're like. And you know who has been like reporting people's channels and getting them taken down and doing all kinds of down thumbing and stuff. And like for me, the only person whose channel or I didn't report their channel, just one of their comments was one that sounded sort of threatening. And that's what I said, is like, this sounds vaguely threatening. So they can be the judge of that. But anything else, I'll just, if I don't want to interact with someone and they're there to bother me, then and I decide that it's a bother, I just get rid of them. But I don't care other than that. So these people are extremely, everything they project onto you is what they actually are. And it's pretty pathetic. So speaking of pathetic, I guess I could tie this in here, which would be that I was thinking about this the other day because in relation to Luna, and people working on things, when it's you, it's really personal, of course, and also her situation where she's got a safety issue with all of her endeavors. Even at that, she's building in confidence, and that's because of other people being supportive, um, and of herself working on things the way that she has. She's able to now, you can see that change where somebody starts speaking more directly, feeling more confident, feeling more relaxed, not being as rattled or disturbed by the crazies that are trying to bother her. And that's really, really awesome to see. And people like them, they can't really handle adversity. They only can handle chaotic disruptions that they cause for other human beings. They run off and hide after they do that. But if ever they're caught up with and they run out of, the ability to do these kinds of things, then they really, really panic and they become very despondent. And I was thinking about Luna and thinking about this thing that I have on my dresser over here. It's a fortune cookie that, or not a fortune cookie, but it's like a fortune cookie, the paper that comes out of one. And I've had that for literally over a decade. And it says despair is criminal. And I remember when I opened that up that it was such a, meant for me statement and really bizarre that that happened. And that's why I've kept it for all this time. So this was one of my first jobs doing like legal work, but it was a smaller, like less involved job. I was just dealing with their case files and their pleadings. But it was a big construction law firm. And so they had like file, case within a case within a case because they would have like contractors and subcontractors and all of this kind of stuff. And I was fast and I was good at it, but it was incredibly boring. The attorneys, I didn't like them. They were pretty nutty, and one of them was particularly abusive towards one of the other people that worked there. That had to go to court with him all the time. He was when I was, he was a paralegal, and he was treating him horribly, and I was glad I had very limited interaction with them. But yeah, I was looking out the window thinking, because I could actually see this restaurant I used to work at I was just a hostess. This was years before this. So I was looking over there thinking, okay, I used to be over there, and now I'm over here. So I do make more money over here, but I'm probably more unhappy over here. This is weird. And I remember thinking, what did I work for to be here? And it wasn't what I had envisioned myself doing. And I even saw like this homeless man and he had his little encampment down below, like down on the street. And I thought, he's more free than I am. At least he can go where he wants when he wants. But, I was just having all these really despondent thoughts instead of just treating this like it was. It's like, I'm here right now. I don't have to be here forever. But yeah, I got into this kind of state of mind. I thought, like, what am I even doing? And so the main secretary comes in there one day and she says, you know, hey, we're ordering Chinese food. Do we want anything? And I didn't make that much money and I didn't want anything because I thought it would be too expensive. And she said, well, it's our treat. The company's paying for it. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, then I want anything. So I get my food later and I open up this fortune cookie and it says, despair is criminal, which I thought was hilarious. It was totally meant for me, kind of a message. And that stuck in my head. I always have that in my mind when I'm working on something that's seems daunting or maybe not worth working on or something like you're not going to get anywhere with that. Those kind of thoughts creep in. And then you remember, despair is criminal. And these criminals that really are criminals, they are in a state of despair. That kind of stuff doesn't last forever. It's a house built on sand. They're not gonna, last forever doing this stuff. And it's also not original, cool, nature-based stuff. It's really just stuff you could find in any government mind control program, fucking with people, trying to control other people. And once those people, instincts always override programming, in my opinion. Nature always finds a way to come out. You can see a million examples of it. Read about the FLDS, people that were born and raised in that, bust through with their own brain. So this won't work forever, and they will be caught. And it doesn't have to be, because of any effort of anyone out here other than the long process that Luna's already going through. But either way, they will fail in life and they will fail in their ability to continue to do this stuff.